In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Welcome to the session, dear listener. I am Jack, your narrator, and I would like to take you on a journey into stories of Warhammer 40k. But these are not the official stories that more renowned narrators than I have covered. These are stories inspired by the rich lore of this universe, by the fans, for the fans. Let us begin. Ice and Starlight by Daniel Somerville. Every breath Aramis took spread the ice a little further across the inside of his canopy. Starlight shimmered around the crystals as the crippled ship curved across the heavens. Yet still, they grew. Mechanically, Aramis repeated the ritual of the emergency checklist. He toggled switches he knew were dead. He read aloud the dwindling supplies of oxygen and fuel, although there was nobody alive to hear him. He broadcast the Mayday signal himself, even though it was no more likely to be received than the robotic repetitions of the automated system.
Samick 907, calling all frequencies. Mayday, repeats, Mayday. Location, Relictus system. Object 5, in orbit. Orbital period, 9 hours. Survivors, 1. Projected survival.
He looked down at the gauges.
71 hours. Limiting factor, O2 supply. Mayday. Repeat, Mayday.
This finished, there was nothing else to do but watch the ice crystals grow. A voice crackling over the Voxlink jerked Aramis upright.
Talia 406 calling Samick 907. Copy Mayday. A location? Interstellar. Relates to the Perdicis system. Transit 15% complete. Request retransmit your location. Over.
Samick 907,
Aramis transmitted.
calling Talia 406. Location, Relictus system. Object 5, in orbit. Mayday. Repeat, Mayday.
Aramis projected a star map onto the heads-up display, highlighting the Perdicis system. It lay close to the horizon, formed by the bulk of Object 5. As his orbit continued, he watched it creep into the hazy outer layer of the gas giant. The minutes slipped by. Half the system had vanished before the Vox crackled once more.
Talia 406.
The voice faded into inaudibility before returning.
Not received. Request retransmit.
A burst of static erased the end of the message. Aramis repeated his plea 3 times, without reply. 4 hours later, as the Perdicis re-emerged on the upward curve of his orbit, he tried again, focusing the power of the transmitter in the direction the other ship had been heading. Nothing. The ice thickened on the inside of the canopy, blurring the starry pinpricks into an indistinct glow. Shivering, Aramis went through his ritual yet again.
Projected survival, 57 hours. Limiting factor, O2 supply. Mayday, repeat, Mayday.
Samick 907.
Said a voice, crystal clear in his headphones.
We note your distress. Coming to your assistance.
Aramis's heart leapt within him. So immediate a response. Such a clear signal could only have come from a ship close by.
Samick 907, it's an unknown call sign. Request identity and location. Over.
We are Interstellar. Coming from
The voice paused as if the name were unfamiliar.
Desolatus system.
Aramis frowned. The voice had sounded so near.
Samick 907, it's the unknown call sign.
Aramis repeated.
Request identity and ETA.
The voice, in defiance of all Vox etiquette, chuckled.
Don't fret,
it said.
We'll be with you in 60 hours or so. 70 at the most.
Despair flooded back into Aramis's veins.
I ran over here in 57 hours,
he replied, abandoning protocol himself.
59 if I can find a functioning suit. I can't last that long.
The voice sounded unruffled.
Stand by.
The pict screen on Aramis's dash flickered into life. It took him a moment to realize what it was showing him.
An extra-orbital trajectory,
he said aloud into the Vox.
Towards Desolatus.
Quite right,
said the voice.
It'll bring the rendezvous ahead by 10 hours. I trust you have the fuel.
Only just,
Aramis replied.
If I leave orbit, that will be it. None left, even to maneuver.
Enough is as good as a feast,
replied the other.
You sure the rendezvous?
Aramis asked.
If we miss it, I'm heading towards a dead system.
We know,
said the voice.
But never fear, we'll catch you.
Aramis took a deep breath.
Roger that.
He accepted the suggested trajectory and fed it into the autopilot. The screen indicated that the ship would be approaching the slingshot point in just under 20 minutes. Coaxing the ship back into life kept Aramis busy, gently warming the engines, bypassing crippled systems, suppressing power surges that threatened vital components. He tried to keep his breathing slow and steady, preserving his oxygen supply as best as he could. He considered scraping the ice off the canopy, but decided it didn't warrant the exertion.
Burn commencing in 10, 9,
announced the autopilot. Aramis rested his hand on the control column, staring straight ahead.
Ignition.
The shock of the first burn pressed him back into his seat. The second induced a vibration that made his teeth chatter. Something was wrong. Straining against the G-forces, Aramis looked down at his instruments. The thrust on B engine was intermittent, causing the ship to drift off course. He reduced A throttle and adjusted the controls, steering by his screens. The vibration and the varying thrust made it hard to keep Desolatus in his target zone. But Aramis was an experienced pilot. He'd drilled for this 1,000 times. At last, the engines coughed and expired, one after the other. The ship flew on, gliding silently into the void.
Samick 907 to unknown call sign,
Aramis transmitted.
In transit, heading from Relictus, Object 5 to Desolatus, Object 1. Error, ±7 seconds of arc. Request acknowledge.
The Vox stayed silent. Instead, the pict screen flickered. The face that appeared was pale and thin, with an aquiline nose and prominent cheekbones. Long, dark hair was pulled back from her forehead, marred by a constellation of silver piercings. The face was cold, arrogant, with a hint of cruelty. It was also clearly not human. For some time, the human and the alien stared at one another, the one in horror, the other with a trace of amusement.
Well,
said the Drukhari,
I am disappointed that we will not meet in person. It would have been entertaining. But you have helped us pass the time on an otherwise dull voyage.
It waved a hand in a dismissive gesture.
Fly on, Monkey. Explore the stars.
And so, with our story concluded, I would like to invite you to another reading at your leisure. If you're a person that prefers the written medium, then I shall share the library in which these tales can be read in the description. I am not affiliated with 40k Cold Open Stories, just a man who enjoys the tales therein. Until next time, dear listener.